All right, so people want to know, how does Tyson Fury measure up when it comes to the other legends in the heavyweight division of all times? After recently beating Dylan White, of course these talks are going to come up. I've already went over in the video that I did previously why the greatest fighter of all time talks always come up with certain fighters, and why they always using Ali's name to praise certain fighters. I've already done a video on that. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to leave the link in the description box. But this is about where does Tyson Fury measure up as far as the greats of the heavyweight division. And I think that people always seem to jump ahead of themselves. I think before you can even knock on the door of greatest of all times, or even comparing Tyson Fury to certain fighters, you first have to ask, is Tyson Fury the best of his era? Now, without a doubt, Tyson Fury is definitely one of the best of his era, if not the best, arguably. The only thing about that is, I think, to get it out the realm of he say, she say, to get it out the realm of preference, and to get it out of the realm of what some people may feel versus what facts are, that's why I think it's always best for people to go for undisputed. So by saying that Tyson Fury is the best in his era, it can be argued and people are going to feel a certain way. But, when you compete for undisputed, then it's not left to question. And to truly be considered the best of his era without question, Tyson Fury would have to compete for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. That's the only thing that will make it complete. Other than that, it's a coin toss up on how somebody feels on a certain day, or, what person is a fan of what boxer, But I think that's one of the best things to clear it up. But if you stand back and if you look at things, Tyson Fury is definitely in the lineup to be one of the best fighters of his era. Now, a lot of talk comes in with Tyson Fury about him taking on other fighters in different eras. Primarily, they really don't waste time with anybody else. They just like to skip straight to Ali. They like to jump, basically to the highest pinnacle and the highest praise, and not knowing within itself is disrespectful, but I've already went over that too. But what a lot of people are saying is, it would be hard for anybody to deal with Tyson Fury, being the fact that he's, 6'6", what is he, 6'6", 6'7", 250, 60, 70, sometimes 280, maybe even 300 sometimes pounds. And that will just be hard for the fighters of the yesteryears to battle and to deal with. See, the problem with this is people say a lot of things, and they have to be aware of what they say, because what they say previously before can easily cancel out what they're going to say in the future. And what I mean by that is this: they say that Tyson's size is a big factor, and they don't think most of the heavyweights would have been able to deal with that. But people are forgetting the fact that Tyson Fury spent over half, more than majority of his career being considered to us in the outside world, in the boxing public, as a pillow-fisted fighter. Okay? He wasn't considered somebody to have any kind of power until the tail end of his career. So what does that mean? How in one instance can you say his size would be such a problem for the fighters of any era to deal with, and yet he's been considered for most of his career a soft-fisted, baby-fisted fighter? The point is, if his size was going to be a problem for heavyweights of any era, then it should have been a problem evidently from the beginning. But he's been that size the entire time, and he was still considered a pillow-fisted fighter. So somebody's going to have to explain to me how all of a sudden him being 6'6" and 200 and whatever something pounds is all of a sudden a deciding factor of what boxers from what era wouldn't be able to deal with because of how big he was. Okay, well, like I said, he's been big this entire time, and still for a large amount of his career, over half his career, hasn't posed any threat in the power department. So I'm trying to figure out what threat does him being 6'6" and 200 and some odd pounds has to do with guys not being able to handle Tyson Fury all of a sudden. It's very simple once you think about it. How are you going to say that in that sense? And yet, at one point in time, everybody teased him for being one of the biggest heavyweights who didn't have any power. Now, give and take, Sugar Hill teaches him how to sit down on his punches. He's doing good. He's doing well. You know what I'm saying? But to say that now, it's funny. And I think before you get to knocking on the doors of the greats and stuff like that, and the Alis and all that stuff like that, I think you first got to make a pit stop, at least in the 80s. You know what I'm saying? You need to question, could he beat even a Lennox Lewis? Now, I like Anthony Joshua, but if Anthony Joshua and Lennox Lewis got into the ring, I have no doubt that Lennox Lewis would beat Anthony Joshua. The same thing with Deontay Wilder, the same thing with Dillian White, and the same thing with pretty much any other of these heavyweights. More than likely, I'll lean towards Lennox Lewis to be able to beat him straight up, and that includes Tyson Fury. So you first got to see if he could deal with, the Riddick Bowes of the world, the Foremans, hold on, Foreman is going too far back. You still have a big crop of heavyweight fighters before you even get to the deep legends that you have to figure out, can he even get past? And like I said, Tyson Fury, as far as Tyson Fury's abilities go, he's definitely one of the top in his era. But I think when people talk about our fighters good and competing against, some of the greats, I think before you even get there, you first have to ask yourself, is this a fighter that you think could compete in any era? See, not all boxers are going to be people that you think that could compete in any era. Tyson Fury is somebody that I'm pretty sure he could compete in any era. Anthony Joshua couldn't compete in any era. Deontay Wilder couldn't compete in any era. Now that's one thing that I could say about Tyson Fury. But before you can even get to that, like, there's layers you got to go through before you just jump to the greatest of all time and Ali praise and all that other stuff. It's a lot of layers that you have to go through. So before you can even do that, you have to ask yourself, and it's levels that you have to ask yourself. It's not that, can you compare this fighter to the great heavyweights of all time? The question is, what you really have to do is you have to look in the era in which these fighters were dominant. And if you was to give the heavyweight division a fair assessment, the heavyweight division as of now, and has been for a while, is the weakest it's ever been in the history of boxing. That's just to be honest. The heavyweight division is not thick. The heavyweight division is very light. There's not a lot of bodies in it, and there's not a lot of competition. When people call on some of these greats, you have to look at the era in which they competed, in which they were dominated in. And at that time, competition was way more thick. There was more people to compete. They were stronger. They did more rounds. They were just built different. It's a different era. So before we can jump around and say, oh, this guy's greater than this guy, or he's greater than this guy from this era, we first have to analyze the era in which these people are dominant. And if you was to take Tyson Fury and compare him to any of the people that he's getting compared to out there, and if you was to size up their eras, Tyson Fury will always have the weakest era in which he was dominant. And most boxers would at this point. You know what I'm saying? Because the fighters of the yesteryears are just still the pinnacle to this day. They was just different. You know what I'm saying? Something in the water, something in the food, whatever. But they was just different. And Tyson Fury is dominant in one of the softest areas. When you pull on people like Ali and all these other people, they were dominant when the era and the competition was a whole lot tougher. So there's layers that you have to break through before you can get to try to say somebody's the greatest this, somebody's the greatest that. And then you have to look at who they beat at the same time to even be called great. Keep in mind, this whole Great and Ali talk about Tyson Fury didn't start till he beat somebody like Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder is somebody who I believe he couldn't fight in any era. Deontay Wilder's been a one-trick pony. Deontay Wilder has had a lot of soft touches. I mean, his career's pretty much been baby, for the most part. And, a lot of people accuse him of not taking on good competition. Well, when Tyson Fury beats somebody like this, you can't shove him to the top like, like Ali beat Sonny Liston or something like that. Like, you can't do that. Because Deontay Wilder, beyond that right hand, was no threat to nobody. Deontay Wilder has lost so many rounds in so many fights and been saved by a right hand or a knockout. Is ridiculous for somebody who win fights that they were actually losing, as far as rounds is concerned. And Dillian Whyte is not considered the top tier of the heavyweight division. He's up there with he's up there with the best of them. But as far as the cream of the crop, the top of the division, Dillian Whyte is not that either. So once again, you have to look at, Dillian Whyte is not no Joe Frazier. So these are the things that you have to look at, and that's why people need to pump their brakes. But like I said, when it comes to certain fighters, they're going to get that kind of praise. But this is the thing about Tyson Fury. Although you have those people out there who love to overshoot and be overzealous with compliments with fighters due to their complexion, Tyson Fury is somebody who's actually legit. You can't help the people who want to, he's a boxing god. You can't help those people. But one thing that you can say is, what they say about Tyson Fury is not a farce. There's nobody in the heavyweight division that moves like Tyson Fury. That's one thing that he has over all these heavyweights. There's nobody that moves like him. It's to be a big guy, to be that big, and in the heavyweight division, he moves the best. Tyson Fury got rhythm. He's very elusive. That alone in that division, if one of the most dangerous things to put on a heavyweight is speed and power. And then you add movement to that, speed, power, and movement, then you got Tyson Fury. That's why he's somebody who could have competed in any era. Tyson Fury has the footwork for it. So he's definitely the best mobile heavyweight of this era. But the things that they say about Tyson Fury, they're not fake. They're all real. He really does deserve all the praise, but to shoot him straight to the top as being one of the best, no, because it's a lot of guys of the yesteryears that, as much as I like Tyson Fury, I know for a fact he wouldn't beat him. And a lot of people know that too, but is Tyson Fury the greatest fighter in this era? Arguably so, if he competes for undisputed. Is Tyson Fury the greatest fighter of all times? It's stupid to even try to entertain something like that, and really doesn't even need to be justified. But anyways, that's all I got for now. I'm out.